Hello, sociology students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 5, Section 2, Social Structure and Roles. And we're going to talk a little bit about roles. Roles are basically the behavior and rights and obligations expected of someone occupying a particular status. And roles are also a component of social structure that bring statuses to life. And so when we look at every status, there's always a set of expected behavior, obligations, and privileges that go along with that. And a single status position can involve several different roles that one would take on. So let's focus on these rules. We have reciprocal rules. These are corresponding rules that define patterns of interaction between related statuses. One can't fulfill the role associated with the status of a husband without having someone else perform the role along that goes along with the status of being a wife. All right. There are role expectations. And these are socially determined behaviors expected of a person performing a role. This includes social norms that determine how a role should be played. There is also the performance of the role performance. This is how the role is portrayed or played. This is actually a role behavior and may not always match the behavior expected by society. There is role strain. This occurs when there are contradictory expectations built into a single role. This occurs when a person has difficulty meeting those role expectations of a single status. So that might be like being a student, but also being a student athlete. There's that push pull of getting good grades, but also the push pull of putting enough time in for practice to be, performing at the top level. And finally, the role conflict. This occurs when two or more roles place some competing demands on the individual, making it difficult to fulfill the role expectations of another status. So, role behavior conforms to the norms and ensures the smooth and predictable patterns of interaction within a society. A group is a collection of people with related statuses or roles who interact with one another in a social group. Groups can range in size from anywhere between two people to very large bureaucracies. When we talk about groups, there's usually what we call a primary group. This is like a small group, but it interacts very intimately over a fairly long period of time. This might include like your family. It might include a very close circle of childhood friends that continue to interact throughout their teens and their adulthood. But this also is something that you might form as you go off to college or when you get into your adult life. Anyway, secondary group. This is a little bit more temporary as far as the relationship. It's typically goal orientated. There is that anonymous slash impersonal side to a secondary group. This could be like a large class. So, like if you happen to take a very large college course where there might be, upwards to 60, maybe more students within a class. This would be a secondary group. You're together for a short time. You might know each other, but you're not necessarily going to have long-term relationships with one another unless that secondary group breaks off into primary groups. All right. Institutions. We've talked a little bit about these. There are many different types of institutions that are out there. We're going to name a few here in a second, but institutions are the stable cluster of norms, values, statuses, roles, and groups that develop around the basic social needs. This includes your family, but it also includes education, religion, your medical system, economic system, political systems, science, military, legal system, and sports. Characteristics of institutions tend to be resistant to change. In other words, world can be changing around us, but these things are going to remain stable. And sometimes they're taken for granted because they provide that continuity. Institutions tend to be interdependent. They do rely on one another and they kind of hold similar values and norms. Institutions tend to change together. So change in one usually results in changes in others. And finally, institutions tend to be the site of major social problems. So when an institution fails to satisfy a basic social need, it's the site of a problem, usually responding because they responded slowly to change. So when you talk about things like systemic racism and such, this might be where you start seeing some of those things being played out, either in the form of your political system or educational system or other areas. All right. Thank you very much.